I'll get to UFC 123 in a minute. First, I'm just going to make a couple of comments about yesterday's Rangers game against Kilmarnock. It wasn't exactly the kind of display that's going to put the fear of coming to Ibrox into Manchester United. And I read a really amusing quote from Kenny Miller today where he was talking about how he was happy with the hat trick, but he should have scored five. No, you shouldn't. You were on a form yesterday, Kenny, where it was going to be one of those games where you kept messing up. Basically, two penalties and okay, he got a decent goal, but the two penalties are why he had a hat trick under his belt. They were valid penalties, I can't argue with that. But a 2-3 win over Kilmarnock, I don't think Alex Ferguson is going to be too worried about coming to Ibrox on Wednesday. I still think we will beat Manchester United at Ibrox. I've got to say that now. No doubt I'll be back on here on Wednesday night saying that I got it wrong, and we'll just need to wait and see. It was a great game as far as midfield play is concerned from both Kilmarnock and Rangers, but I didn't think either the defence or the attack on both sides stood for much at all. It was a decent match, but I would have been hoping for more against Kilmarnock, to be honest. Anyway, UFC 123 kicked off with Joe Lawson versus George Sotrapalous. And the first round, George was being far more aggressive, but George was being far more aggressive, but Joe, when he got the chance to do things, was actually making them count. George was pushing and pushing and pushing, but really what he was doing wasn't counting for much. But then he got control in the later part of the match, and it looked like George was going to get on top, but Joe did. And he controlled it, but eventually it got back up to the feet, and George took Joe down and got in the armbar. Wasn't a particularly great armbar, the technique was a bit shoddy, but it was locked in and it was good enough that whereas had it been applied later in the game, it probably wouldn't have led to a submission, but it was on for far too long. Lawson had no choice but to submit. I mean, it was entertaining enough, so I'd say I'd be generous and give it 4 stars. It was a decent little fight for us there. Phil Davis versus Tim Bosch. After some reasonable stand-up, Davis got an excellent takedown and threw in some body shots. Bosch got back up with 20 seconds remaining, but the first round was all Davis. Second round became a dull cage pushing match. Davis took Boschek down, but wound up in a guillotine. He escaped though and went for a Gumura. Took the pain on the Gumura for a long time as well on this one, and eventually had to tap out. And so Phil Davis gets his hand raised in victory. I'd rate that match a 3. I'm not going to go into the replay of Paul Kelly versus O'Brien. It was a really good match, but it wasn't part of the pay-per-view. It was a replay of a match from the prelims. Good match, and Kelly got the win on that one. Michael Falco versus Gerald Harris. I'd say 2 rounds to 1 for Falco, and the referees agreed with me on this one. Harris didn't do much in the third round, but what he did do was enough to take it from me. But as I said, it was a case of what Falco had done for the first 2 rounds was good enough to get the win. Reasonable grappling game, but nothing spectacular. Definitely the worst match of the night. I hope Falco, put it this way, Falco did so little in the third round that I hope he's got a contract with the UFC rather than And I'll just have to pause this because Kathy, who's supposed to be pausing South Park, hasn't. Okay, anyway. Really, if Falco doesn't have a contract, I don't think he's going to be getting invited back because although he was impressive in those first 2 rounds, he didn't have it all his own way. And really, based on how he was chickening out in the third round, he really should be getting called up on it. It was pretty dire stuff from him. Worst match of the night, Falco wins, but he was far from impressive based on his third round, just lying back and doing nothing. We then had a rarity for UFC. We had a rubber match, which, you know, was hoping for something spectacular, as I'm going to give it no score because what happened was BJ came out and absolutely murdered Matt in 21 seconds flat. BJ had a look of intensity about him even before the fight started that you just knew he was determined to do something here, and he did. I'm not going to rate the match at all. BJ had to be brought back into the cage to conduct his interview. He was wanting to get straight out of there, but he went back in eventually. And then we had our main event, Lyoto Machida versus Rampage Jackson. Now, both these guys needed a win, let's be honest about it. And I thought Jackson had the first round, he was definitely pushing it more, he had more control of the middle of the ring. But Machida definitely had the best of the second round, and Machida absolutely dominated the third round. And it was a great match, and I would have given it 4 stars. Unfortunately, it did go to the referees, and the decision was an absolute joke. No disrespect to Jackson, but Machida won that fight hands down, especially based on the third round, and the referees give Jackson a split decision. I cannot begin to comprehend what on earth they were thinking. Where did they get that from? Did they score the first round and then not score the remaining 2 rounds? Quite possibly the worst judge's decision I've ever seen in the history of mixed martial arts. Couldn't believe it. Really took a shine off what had actually been a very good event up until then. I'm going to give the match 3 stars. I would love to have given it 4, but I can't because of that decision, and it took such a shine off the whole thing that whereas I was going to give the pay-per-view 4 stars, again, it's only going to get 3. But I would go out of my way to catch it if I was you. If you've not seen it and you're planning to and can't decide, yeah, definitely catch it. Great little pay-per-view. Only the Falco fight was a letdown. You'll get a pretty good replay of a prelim match there as well, which was good. We'll be doing a video on Survivor Series, but since I'm not watching it on a night I'm going to be able to get anywhere near the computer, I can't make any guarantees over how decent the video is going to be for it, but I will do a proper review for Rangers versus Manchester United.